All right, fantastic. I hope you've enjoyed your lunch and ready to digest some nice content that we have here today. It's really great to be able to speak a little bit about enterprises. I was doing a bit of ChatGPTing before the panel, and ChatGPT really does believe that it's Cardano's time to shine. We may have missed DeFi summer, we may have missed kind of the NFT hype, but I do believe that we are ready for enterprise adoption. So really looking forward to having this panel here today. So, I mean, enterprises have very much always tried to optimize for control, and it's always difficult to have control via intermediaries. But with blockchain technologies, you can do that inherently within the technology. So very much looking forward to kind of hearing more about that from our esteemed guests here. Maybe we'll just kind of go one by one, just kind of give a quick intro to just your companies, yourselves, very quickly in 20 seconds. And maybe you can just give us your definition of what does it mean to have or build, let's say, trust-minimized business architecture. What does trust-minimized mean? It's quite an interesting one. So maybe you'd like to start first, Stefan.
That all in 20 seconds?
Yes, like in maybe 19.
Stefan, I manage protocol partnerships at Blockdaemon. We're a global infrastructure provider, mostly focused at enterprises. And what we do is, we run the nodes, staking, wallets, all you need to build your blockchain use case. And I guess in that sense, we're mostly a partner for companies that want to use this decentralized distributed technology to make existing use cases better or, create new ones. And we're their partner.
Fantastic. Thank you. Christoph?
Thank you. I'm Christoph Schneider. I'm Head of IT Development and Operations at the Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation, where we deal with organization identity and have, for a couple of years now, an ecosystem launched that's the verifiable legal entity identifier, so that organizations and representatives of organizations can authenticate and authorize themselves digitally. And I think regarding the definition of the trust-minimized business systems is a very important topic because we know that the reliability to such ecosystems where you can exchange this information is just paramount. And you could get the impression that trust minimized means there is less trust or no trust at all. We talked about zero trust architectures a year ago. And the opposite is the case. Because you have such a high reliability, you don't need to only trust, but you can trust because you have the high reliability.
Thank you. Navjit?
My name is Navjit Dhaliwal. I'm the CEO and founder of Iagon. Iagon is a shared distributed storage and compute economy, something like Airbnb for storage and compute, a marketplace where idle resources like storage and compute are available to people that need them. And how we minimize, the trust part aspect of it is we focus on sovereign data storage, meaning that, the user, we put the hands of the trust in the user. So if the user can trust his own information and how they allocate the data, that was me, or? Yeah, so how they allocate the data in a sovereign way, we put the data controller and data processor in their hands, meaning that they're the ones that choose where the data goes and how it's allocated to the network.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd love to touch on the user part in a bit, but it's true that it is, let's say, technology first. So we'll let Stefan pick it up first. So from an infrastructure standpoint, when we talk about trust minimization, can you give us a little bit more context there? Like, how do you minimize trust with the infrastructure? Is it less pieces of the puzzle? Give us a bit more context.
Yeah, I would zoom out here a little bit and look at it from a company perspective. When they look at blockchain infrastructure as a whole, and we're a part of it, right, running the physical infrastructure, I think, as Christoph said, trust minimized for big corporates and TradFi institutions does not mean trustless or eliminating trust. It means, I think, verifiable trust at scale. And I think this comes at two levels. So one of them is that you will indeed eliminate the need to trust what a single entity says, right? You don't have to trust a company that they will do what they say they will do. You can actually just look on chain and see if they did what they would, said they would do, because we have everything with timestamps, tamper-proof, immutable, verified by a decentralized set of validators. So in this case, we can indeed eliminate the dependence on a single company. But then there's another level, and this was, explained in detail as well in the study that was brought out yesterday, the trust anchors, and I'm sure that will fall very much into the data side of things here. But I think this is where blockchain becomes really transformative, where you don't, or you can make use cases happen where you don't need all data from a person. Think of a passport, you only verify is the person at the right age or not, right? You work with zero knowledge proofs. You don't, like we thought maybe 10 years ago, save all data on a blockchain, but you keep your Web2 databases, but you link them, to proofs saved on chain, and can realize new use cases with this. And I think then in use cases like global payments on a business level and many more, we will see this verifiable or cryptographic proof, trust, scalable at chain.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, Navjit, we were in a conversation about this just yesterday with Worth, and we were chatting about, I mean, how do you convince these enterprises that it's reliable? I mean, there's a lot of education, there's a lot of things that go into it, and you've had quite a lot of success on that front. So how do you convince them?
For us, actually, in terms of adoption, we've been fortunate enough that the enterprises have approached us with a problem. So it's less about convincing and showcasing, let's say, this problem can actually fix the problem that you have at hand. And it does take a lot of trust, and obviously you have to develop that trust over time. Like with Worth Group, we've been speaking to for almost 2 years, and the partnership only started a year ago. So it took a lot of trust to get there. But I think that as long as you can showcase that there is a way to solve certain problems, like we did with IP monetization for 3D parts, I think that trust can be built upon there. And not relying on a single entity, as you said, in a distributed system, where the trust is based on a distributed manner and on everything is traced back to on-chain verifiable data, right?
Yeah, trust is not an overnight success. I mean, it's interesting that you remark that it's been 2 years in the making for you to now have that booth alongside them, have that partnership in place where people are just like, oh, it just happened, but actually, 2 years in the making. So thank you for sharing that. And now, Christoph, to yourself, I mean, how do identity and verification systems evolve when enterprises are no longer, let's say, just focusing on one centralized entity?
Yeah, so I agree with what both Stefan and Navjit just said. And I would add for our ecosystem, as we are a federated system and we do not deal directly with the users, it is really important to have global standards and also global protocols that have been agreed for the inter-exchange, because basically what you're trying to do is to convince people from going from a central system that they fully control to something that they don't control. And now the trust comes back. So what you really need is an eye-level interaction, and I believe the internet is a very good example where the protocol actually brought the success that it had. If that had been a central offering, then I think we wouldn't be where we are.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I mean, and Stefan, you mentioned this before, right? I mean, that trust minimized doesn't mean trustless. It just means verifiable. And so to speak to that, there's been a lot of kind of cases recently when we've spoken about uptime and compliance, and especially when you're looking at it from an enterprise-grade standpoint. So what does that look like in a decentralized infrastructure?
Yeah, it looks very boring from the outside, I would say. The entry point, of course, is, being compliant with the requirements of the jurisdiction or your customer. And then it's really about running infrastructure that is safe, secure, scalable, reliable. There's many words for it. It comes down to you don't want to, increase your vulnerabilities or your dependencies or your risk that your service fails. And we have seen what happens, with data center outages just recently. It's really funny when it's a bed that is upright and connected to the cloud, and you can't turn it, into a horizontal position anymore. It's not so funny if your core service runs on it. And so what that means for us is, working on every risk metric, support teams 24/7, engineering squads around the world with special focus. Running on different data centers, of highest grades, geo-distributed, to, all the risk metrics you could bring down to ensure that your infrastructure is as resilient as possible. So, because, reality is things can go wrong, and I think we try to prepare. And this is also what the customers want to prepare for the case. What if something goes wrong? Are we able to, keep the service up and running? And I think that's the main question that also many of these companies have when they enter, any of these use cases. Because, the blockchain can be great, the use case can be great, but you also need the infrastructure to, communicate internally. This is not a huge risk. We will not lose, face when everything crashes. We have a good setup.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because it's the service that you're enabling is relatively simple, but in order to render that, it's relatively complex. And so it's very, even just talking about the global standpoint, where you have to have people all over the world ready to ensure that things have a 100% uptime, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, much more complex, but behind the hood. Navjit, let's talk a little bit more about that, what Stefan just kind of built on, related to like how do you measure and deliver performance parity with centralized cloud solutions while maintaining that decentralized side of things. Can't be an easy task.
Yeah, so from our side, what we do with the idle capacities, so we call them nodes, and we learn their behavior in different variables, which are important to the end user, like performance, uptime, location for compliance reasons, right, and other variables that might be important to them. And we match them up with their needs. So if you wanted to store, an enterprise wanted to store their data in Germany or Canada, wherever it is, you could geofence the data and distribute it to whatever they would like. So if they require higher performance, high uptime, and that's what the data will be allocated to, or the compute. So that's how we figured out with performance. That sometimes, in some aspects, it's actually more performant because the minimum requirements for those nodes are much higher and more local to the consumer. So and not in all cases, of course, do you have, like I said, sometimes a decrease in performance because you're distributed and not all the performance is available in certain regions. But we have currently around 750 nodes across 54 countries, and a lot of them bare metal, a lot of data centers that are available in the network that provide these services.
That's a very interesting point. The fact that each component is, let's say, separated and it's just not one larger entity, you scrutinize each individual part a little bit more. As you mentioned, like the minimal is higher. I think it's a very interesting point, because when it's just one block, I mean, it's not, let's say in the centralized organization, not always one block, but you're just like, okay, this is it. When it's each individual, you can kind of like monitor each one more separately. It's a really cool part. Christoph, to yourself, I mean, more on the technical challenges here, I think especially when it comes to scaling globally with verifiable identity infrastructure. I mean, it sounds like quite a challenge, especially with the evolving world that we're facing. Can you give us a little bit more context there on those technical challenges that you're facing?
Absolutely, and they're not so different than what we heard before from our two colleagues here. So technical redundancy, of course, plays a big role, having enough capacity to do what you need to do. Also, performant protocols are important. So to have operations cheap enough to get them through in the bandwidth that you need them. But besides the technical aspects, I think there's another thing that is really important if you're talking about global digital identity, and this is a shared trust anchor. So technology must work, but then also you need to be able to trust something that everybody can agree on, and that also relates to the global standards, of course. And yeah, I think these are the two important drivers.
Yeah, some of the main points. And I think when we're looking at those factors, you have interoperability, you have governance, and you have compliance as three of the main pillars. And it's three that I want to go a little bit deeper in, and maybe we stay on yourself, kind of Christoph here. I mean, so how does GLEIF integrate these traditional kind of governance models, LEIs, regulation, etc., with decentralized identifiers and verifiable credentials? I mean, that's quite something to unpackage. You're doing a lot there.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, it's actually the next logical step, because when the LEI Foundation was created in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, firstly to identify counterparties to financial transactions, but then also created as really a global identification system for all kinds of organizations on the planet. you had a number which allowed counterparties to clearly identify organizations, but that was about it. If you were the owner of an LEI, you didn't have a lot of benefit for it. And this is when we created the digital version, the VLEI on top of it, so that not only organizations could use the digital identity to prove themselves in online transactions who they are, but also for persons representing organizations in specific roles to authorize them to do certain things. For example, enable them to perform certain actions towards business customers and partners, or to log into a system, or also just to prove that they have a certain official role, and there's also an ISO standard for that. Okay. So that was quite consequent for us, and we think there's a big need for this, especially in all the systems that are now coming up for a global identity standard.
Yeah, I'm certain that standards, global standards really help. Maybe, Navjit, here you can give us some more context on some of the models that have worked for coordinating decentralized resources at scale, because there must be certain processes, certain approaches that you're taking.
Yeah, so what we do is we learn the behavior of nodes, and we learn their behavior in terms of performance, uptime, different other variables, like I said prior, and we give the nodes a reputation score, and based on the reputation score, that's how that the users are matched according to their needs. We do have other governance models more on the side that are going to be in the future, which are implemented more by the users. So depending on what the users require, we can implement that in the future. For example, if the requirements are to have ISO certifications or different kind of certifications on different levels, maybe making even a private distributed network, those can be done through our model, through the users that govern the system.
Yeah, thank you. And it's a good point there when also we're looking at a lot of those processing models here and to yourself, Stefan. I mean, when there's not just, let's say, one kind of, let's say, button or kind of nail to kind of press on, a pin to press on, how is accountability ensured? When there's no central authority behind it.
Yeah, I think that ties exactly into what I mentioned earlier and also what Christoph just said, right? We have this blockchain system, tamper-proof, timestamp data, which will leave a huge audit or breadcrumb trail, basically. And so if something goes wrong, we can just follow the blockchain and see who is involved. And I'm sure Christoph could talk a lot more to this, like what new roles or also company types will exist in the future that ensure that this off-chain data is trustworthy and that we can use these trust anchors and actually trust them. And I believe, then you don't have this dispute of he said, she said anymore, or you have to compare things, but you have the very clear on-chain data. One thing I wanted to add, though, because Navjit, you mentioned it, like also some companies will operate their own private systems. I think when we talk about this whole topic of governance, accountability, interoperability, we also have to address the elephant in the room a little bit. 5, 6, 7 years ago, every blockchain startup would talk about breaking up data silos in companies and everything moves on-chain. That's not 100% going to happen, right? There will be private data. And also, unfortunately, there will not be this one dominant chain that everyone picks, but some run their private chains, some run on Cardano, some somewhere else. So I think interoperability and standards, like you both mentioned, are super important topics if we want to see enterprise adoption at scale.
Yeah, if we want to connect everything together. Yeah, thank you for adding that remark. I think there's one crucial part that we haven't touched upon yet, which sometimes is the most important part, and also one of the reasons why enterprises, or has been said to have not really entered into this market, is because they really move where the money is at. Fortunately, unfortunately, if there's no return on investment, very limited, let's say, capacity to kind of move on some of those things, the way in which the world works today. So, I mean, maybe Navjit, you can kind of start us off here. I mean, like, what tangible efficiencies, cost, redundancies, resilience, do decentralized compute systems offer versus centralized cloud? And maybe you can also give us wider context as well. If you have some thoughts to other use cases than your own, of course, feel free to provide those.
Yeah. So I want to just take a tangible example with Verth Group, for example. So if you don't know the Worth Group partnership, I invite you guys at 3 o'clock upstairs at the rooftop. Make sure that you join that event. So what we're doing with them is IP monetization. And they have a lot of vendors, that car manufacturers like Porsche, GM, Ford, and Subaru, and all these other partners that they work with that print 3D parts or use 3D parts or parts alike, right? And the problem that they had was monetizing this in a feasible way, because the vendor has to trust that the blueprint of that file is not shared with someone else. So if you're the end consumer, and let's say you have a Porsche and you have it in,
Nice.
and you live in Kazakhstan, and there's something wrong with the part on your Porsche. Now, if the authorized dealership was 4 hours away, you're not going to go there. I mean, it's too far away. You're just going to go to a local body shop, and you go to a local body shop and say, hey, I need a part for this, right? But the guy there says, you have to wait 6 to 8 weeks to get your part, because you got it shipped in from Germany to get it. Now, you're not going to do that, because you're just going to go for the alternative solution, which might be like a copy of the part, but not the actual approved part. There's a big problem there, right? First, you have to ship in. If you decide to take the authorized part, there's cost on the shipping. Maybe if you're in the wrong country, sanctions, right? Or tariffs, or whatever it is. And all this cost adds up in the time to shipment. With the solution with Worth Group, for example, you have a printer, which they have, and you can actually install that in the body shop, and being able to monetize that blueprint, meaning that you can secure the file with encrypted storage, distributed storage in a secure way, and prove the traceability on chain and how the process was done, how the payments were done, and you can prove everything on chain with that traceability, and you can do auto distribution of those royalties on chain as well. So all this is public information that they want, and everyone wants, so you can distribute the royalties accordingly. And now you cut out all the costs. You cut out the tax, the shipping, the time of delivery to the end consumer. So a lot of benefits that happen. And you think about how many verticals that can tap. I'm just speaking about the car manufacturer. So that's a tangible way of cost reduction and all the things you made in terms of redundancy with the encrypted distributed storage, and time and efficiency.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a great use case, and I also encourage the fellow panelists as well, if you have any real-world use cases to share as well. I think that's a great one, how it shows that, say, that integrated system really brings things together there. Christoph, let's go next with yourself and understand further, how do the standardized identity systems that you're working on reduce friction, duplication, or even risk across these global networks?
Yeah, I will wear again the digital identity glasses, of course, and I think there's a lot to gain for businesses in these decentralized systems, right? First of all, there's a lot of effort wasted today, effort and time basically, and money also, for onboarding of business partners. Know your customer, know your supplier, know your everything is really costly and slow. And with a distributed system where you can basically rely on the identity that somebody else has provided and has performed these checks already, not only it's much faster, but also the replication within the economy doesn't have to happen. So it's not only a microeconomic, but also macroeconomic gain. Yeah. And then, of course, there's a lot more scalability with such a system compared to everybody does it themselves. And the speed factor is also fantastic. It's also a bit fairer distribution of maintenance efforts when you don't have to have like your central system, but basically it's like a sharing economy. Given the right standards and protocols are used. And I have one practical example. We had the European Banking Authority a year ago do a proof of concept with the VLEI ecosystem, because they had a reporting use case where today just the national banks of the European countries send certain financial reports to the EBA, and then they review these. And there's a new legislation that now each bank in the future will have to submit these reports to the EBA, and they were just focused with a user management problem coming from just a few dozens of organizations to now hundreds or potentially thousands of organizations. And we're wondering how they could solve that. And with a decentralized identity where these banks come with their identity already, and the regulator just has to maintain a whitelist of what they want to receive, they would be able to bring these maintenance efforts down on the one hand side, but for the banks it would also be beneficial because they could control their own identity management for their users and onboarding and offboarding of employees, for example. So I think that there's a lot to gain.
So a lot to gain, faster, better, cheaper, and all of the above. Well, no, thank you. Thank you for sharing. I mean, on the same note, I mean, Stefan, in your opinion, I mean, what's motivating enterprises to integrate distributed node infrastructure that you're providing? I mean, is it cost, transparency, future-proofing? I mean, all of the above again.
Yeah, the answer is exactly. I would say it's a mix of all. Probably most on the cost savings as well as the future-proof. I think cost savings opens you the door, gets you the meeting, gets you the conversation. It's also very important for the person within the company, right, to have some tangible metrics they can communicate to get the budget, to get the approval, right, to start working on it. Why do they then come to us? Because very early on you will come to the point where resiliency comes up, right, or risk. As mentioned before, you don't want to replace your perfectly fine working service with something that may just, more easily break. Ideally, you will make your whole service more robust, right? More resilient, reliable. This is where we come in, but of course, every use case is different there, so they will have to do that evaluation themselves. What also will come up is cost, right? Cost in general, because oftentimes to save money, you have to pay money first. And then the question is, when will this pay off? And I feel we see this with a lot of more TradFi use cases like tokenization, where I feel most banks are ready, but they are not really ready to pull the trigger yet because they're saying, that will increase my cost quite a bit, so I'm waiting until the market really is here. And then I think in the end, though, like the whole future-proofing will win the race. And the use cases you guys made, everything KYC, KYB, supply chain, I think are fantastic use cases because today, or now's the time for corporates, for banks to get ready for how we will look at trade and payments in 4 or 5 years. That is verifiable proof on chain and authentication and distributed ledger payments and such. And so I think they have the decision to make, do I do it today or soon, or will I scramble in a few years? That's one. And then there's also, just the numbers speak for themselves. When you talk about cost savings for existing use cases, trade finance is a great one. I think it combines all that you mentioned before. It's very complex. I don't believe it will be the first use case, many tried. But it's, a use case that uses many components, which in some, are expected to lower cost by like 10 to 15%, I guess, depending on how you do trade finance, maybe more, maybe less. And also, address a real issue. We have a huge financing gap, especially in developing countries. And oftentimes the issue here is authentication, verifiable data. Exactly, what Christoph is talking about. If we can improve this, not only, will big corporates be able to save money, great for them, but also I think we will enable a lot of new business in the future. And hopefully, then on top additional use cases.
Yeah, I guess it's not only about making the rich richer, it's also about enabling, making things easier for the general public as well. And so as we approach the end of our panel here, I mean, let's talk a little bit about the future. It's very hard to predict the future with AI. I mean, ChatGPT was really only implemented less than a year ago, 12 months ago. Not many people were using it, and it's the case today. I think everybody probably has the app on their phone. So let's fast forward 5 years. What does enterprise architecture built on distributed systems look like? And maybe we kind of pose a bit of the yin and yang here. So one enterprise process that will be decentralized by 2030, and one that won't be, because I think it's common knowledge now that, let's say, decentralize everything in the world maybe isn't the best. We need a little bit of a symbiosis. So maybe there is a process today that you don't believe needs to be centralized, and we can also touch upon that one. So, Navjit, would you like to go first?
Sure. I guess for the first part, what should be decentralized or what can be by 2030? Obviously, I'm going to be a bit biased, so decentralized storage and compute, I believe, is already there, and we've kind of shown it with the enterprise adoption. So I think that's very feasible, and not even in 2030, but before that. And for things that aren't, I mean, I'm a dentist, so dentistry can't be decentralized. But aside from the jokes, maybe medical, I think there needs to be some kind of central control, especially for emergencies. If you want to basically route an ambulance or for fires, whatever, there has to be some kind of central control of getting people to the right place.
Okay, like that kind of more emergency button. Yeah, Christoph, yourself?
So I really think that business partner onboarding, we will see a lot of progress in the next 5 years just because there's so much to gain in this area on the cost and effort side. And one thing I really can't imagine to be decentralized, at least not in Germany, is HR and payroll.
Can you give us a little bit of context why?
Just because of how Germans think about their privacy and everything, and these carefulness about putting these things on there. I would be surprised.
Yes. Okay. Fun fact.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I think that's a good one. I hope once we have your use case realized, my big hope is trade finance. For some reason, it's a topic. I think it combines so many things that blockchains can do. Am I certain this is going to be happening at 2030? Not really, but I think we will, start with the components with KYC, KYB onboarding, authentication, verifiable data on chain, global payments, and then once we have the puzzle together, I think we will see more complex use cases one after another come to life. Really looking forward to this. In case of what I don't want to see on chain, I think you guys made excellent points. What I would hope for is that we continue focusing on, I want to say, use cases where blockchain truly brings value, because not for everything where there exists a company that says we do this, but with blockchain, it's necessary. And I think, especially like a few years ago, we've seen a lot of vaporware where it's like old use cases with blockchain disruptive, and I feel. We've come a long way. Regulation gets there, and all sorts of, UK, Singapore, MiCA, and so forth. I think we have a real chance, and I hope that, as a community, we can be responsible here and ensure that we bring the good use cases to life first, and break that hurdle to global adoption.
Yeah, well, fantastic. Thank you. Thanks to the three of you. And I mean, we have a few more seconds on the clock. I started the panel by saying that Cardano is primed today to solve a lot of the challenges that the three of you have mentioned, and also provide the solutions to some of these enterprise cases. There are a lot of enterprises in the room. Some of you alluded to the fact that it's hard to take that leap of faith. Navjit mentioned it took 2 years to get to the point of where you really have live use cases in place. Do you have something, maybe one quick sentence to say to the enterprises here, in the audience that have come to the conference, to make that leap of faith? One thing that may not change their mind, I was going to say change their mind, no, actually push them into kind of making that stance, that leap of faith. Anything like from the top of your mind that could be a good pivotal thought for them?
I invite you guys to come at 3 o'clock to the rooftop, and that's an example of a use case that's built with distributed storage and Cardano, so that would be the best example. It's not live yet, by the way, just so you know, but we're working on it.
Okay. No, great. I mean, great. So either you'll make the leap of faith, or you'll have a great glass of wine, champagne, or whatever you're offering there. Cool. Well, thank you all to great panelists. Thanks to the audience, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.